Good morning and welcome to today's edition of Good Morning Hebrew Home. I am your host for Thursday, Liisa Murray. Today we have a little bit of a different show for you today. We're going guest-free today. And later on in the show, in addition to our regular segments, we're going to do a little armchair travel. I saw Olivia did it on a previous episode and I was very inspired. So let's get started. Today is Thursday, August 13th. Today's weather, it's another hot and humid one with a high of 84, a little cooler than yesterday, and a 70% chance of rain. Mostly cloudy skies all day. On this day in history, in 1935, roller derby is born when the Transcontinental Roller Derby begins at the Chicago Coliseum. In 1961, the construction of the Berlin Wall begins in East Germany. In 1967, Bonnie and Clyde, directed by Arthur Penn and starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, is released. We have a few famous birthdays today. I always feel like once you get into August, the famous birthdays really crank up because it's all the Leos. You know, those Leos who love the spotlight. In 1860, Annie Oakley, American sharpshooter, was born in North Star, Ohio. In 1899, Alfred Hitchcock, English director known for Psycho, Birds, Rear Window, was born in Leytonstone, Essex. In 1930, Don Ho, Chinese-American musician known for his song Tiny Bubbles, born in Honolulu, Hawaii. In 1933, Madhur Jaffrey, Indian cookbook writer and actress Shakespeare Walla, was born in Delhi, British India. Madhur Jaffrey is an amazing Indian cook and cookbook writer and is where, if you follow the show, you know I love to cook Indian food. And she did some of the first Indian cookbooks that really became famous in both the UK and America and was the first cookbook that I got for Indian food. Turning to birthdays here at the home, in staff we have Kwaku from food service, Mabel from medical, and Cindy from marketing. And in resident birthdays today, happy birthday, Deborah T. Big happy birthday to all of you from here at the Good Morning Hebrew Home Show. Today's meal. Today is barbecue day. This is very exciting. So usually during the summer we get to go outside and do barbecues. You know, everything's a little different this year, but we still want to celebrate summer barbecues. So today we're having a lot of barbecue food at lunch. Pardon me, got a little frog in my throat today. So lunch is barbecue brisket, hot dog on a roll, Texas coleslaw, and watermelon for dessert. For dinner tonight is tomato bisque soup. The entree is salmon with bow tie pasta, and the dessert is Jell-O. As always, we remind you to send in any viewer mail. You can either call from a landline here, 2813, or give some mail to your friendly TAP activities person. I heard we've gotten some good, or at least interesting, viewer mail this week. So, our next section, instead of having a guest today, we're going to be doing a little armchair traveling. So today we're going to be traveling to the beautiful country of New Zealand, which I was lucky to spend about 6 months there in 2005 as a study abroad. So we're going to turn over to the smartboard and we're going to show a few pictures. So the very first picture we have here is a map of New Zealand. New Zealand is 2 islands down even further south than Australia. Thinking of us here in New York, it's basically the exact opposite side of the world from New York. It's basically as far away from New York as you could get without starting to get closer again. So when I was in undergrad in 2005, I spent a semester abroad in New Zealand. And I love this map because it shows you not just what New Zealand looks like, but some of the beautiful culture that's there. At the very top, they have their national bird, the kiwi, which is a flightless bird with a very interesting long pointy beak. Whales, all the nature, and then it shows you a little Maori mask up in the left-hand corner, which is from the indigenous people of New Zealand. So our next slide we'll see is Wellington in the North Island. So this is the city that I lived in when I was there. I went to the University of Victoria and took classes. It's a very cool city, small probably by New York standards, but really beautiful, very hilly and mountainous, and a very metropolitan modern city. The next slide we'll see is one of the first trips that I did there, which is the WAITOMO glowworm caves. So what are glowworm caves, you might ask? So they are caves that are formed by volcanic activity made of limestone, and they're full of stalactites, stalagmites, those rocks that seem like they're growing up from the ground or down from the ceiling. And in addition to some other animals and bugs that live there, they have glowworms, which are small bugs that produce a blue-green bioluminescence. And in the dark of the caves, you can see it looks like a starry night that's glowing from up above. It was very cool. I went tubing, so we had to walk all the way down into the caves, and then there are these sort of in-the-cave rivers that we tubed on. You can kind of see at the bottom some people holding tubes and have their helmets with their lights on. And the next slide is a close-up of the bioluminescence, so you can get a really good look at what it looks like close up. It was really beautiful. I've never experienced anything like that before. It was being in a cave, but like looking up at the most beautiful night sky you've ever seen in your life. And very, bugs we usually think of as a nuisance, as something that we don't want around us, but sometimes they do beautiful things like this. Although I still probably wouldn't want it in my bedroom. Our next slide is of Rotorua and the geothermal areas in Rotorua. So one of the things that's really cool about New Zealand is that it has all these different types of natural areas. So in Rotorua, it has a bunch of geothermal areas. Rotorua is part of the Taupo volcanic zone, a geothermal field extending from White Island off the Bay of Plenty coast, which is the very top of the North Island, to Mount Ruapehu far to the south. Rotorua's array of geothermal features, volcanic crater lakes, spouting geysers, bubbling mud pools, hissing fumaroles, and colorful sinter terraces are very impressive. So it looks very much, when I was walking around, I felt like there was going to be a dinosaur coming around the corner or something like that. It looks so prehistoric, so just like something you've never seen before. And I will also say the less impressive part is that the entire town does smell like sulfur because of the volcanic action. So a slightly stinky but beautiful place to go to. Our next slide shows a little bit of the Maori, the indigenous Polynesian people of New Zealand. Maori originated with settlers from eastern Polynesia who arrived in New Zealand in several waves of waka, canoe, voyages between roughly 1320 and 1350. Over several centuries in isolation, these settlers developed their own distinctive culture whose language, mythology, crafts, and performing arts evolved independently from those of other Eastern Polynesian cultures. So while you may see some, if you go to New Zealand, you may see some comparisons made to other Polynesian cultures, they have their own distinct and beautiful culture. In this picture, you can see two people doing a hangi, which is a traditional Maori greeting, where two people press their noses and foreheads together simultaneously and breathe in and out as a way to exchange the breath of life. When I first got to New Zealand, there was a marae, which is the cultural and it's like the center for Maori culture. And they did a welcoming ceremony to welcome us all there. And I did this hangi with someone, and I was so confused about how to do it. I kept trying to move my nose so my nose wouldn't bump into the man's nose. And he was very like, no, you need to touch my nose. That is the thing we are doing. Yeah, and the Maori are a people with beautiful culture, and of course, as many indigenous people in the world, they've when the Pakeha, the people from Britain came, they experienced a lot of hardship. Their culture was often pushed down and seen as, you know, not as wonderful as the UK culture. But in the 1960s, due to a lot of their own sort of civil rights movements, they've reinvigorated interest in Maori culture. So our next slide shows a video of the national rugby team, the All Blacks. Rugby is a huge sport there. Like football is here, rugby is there. And because they are so proud of the Maori culture, they do traditional haka. A haka is known as is a dance that's often used to intimidate or challenge people. So they brought it in at the beginning of every rugby game, and it's beautiful. So let's take a look. Let's check and see how that video is working today. Yes.
And now the All Blacks just waiting for the French to peel off the tracksuits, stand in front of them, and receive the challenge of the haka.
So you see one guy traditionally leads. You see they make a lot of intense faces meant to intimidate their challengers.
The challenge has been received by the French. Stand by, the Rugby World Cup final.
So as you saw in that video, they did a lot of intimidating motions. You might have seen one person pulled his hand across his throat as if I'm going to get you. And I think it's a beautiful example of Maori culture. So this next slide is ABEL Tasman National Park. We're moving down to the South Island of New Zealand. So this is actually a picture I took of ABEL Tasman National Park in Nelson when I went hiking there in 2005. It was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my entire life, and also a very intense 8-hour hike over mountains and near beaches, and it was absolutely beautiful. The next slide is actually a picture of me hiking in ABEL Tasman in 2005. So it's a temperate rainforest. So a lot of times we think about rainforests being like very humid and hot places, maybe in South America, Central America. But this one is temperate. So you can see, you know, I'm wearing pants, a short sleeve shirt. It was not super hot. There are a lot of ferns that grow there, different types of trees that live the entire year long. And it was very, very cool to see all the different types of nature there. Our next slide is looking at Milford Sound. This This picture, it can't even really give you the scale of how giant these mountains are. So these are fjords in the very southern tip of New Zealand. The very southern tip of New Zealand looks like kind of like someone just cut little slashes in the bottom of it. And it's all of these giant mountains that stand up, and you can take a boat and drive through them. They're amazing. There's seals that live on there. There's all sorts of natural life, and it's one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced, to be on a boat and look up from the water at these giant, giant prehistoric looking mountains. Our next slide is another mountain range. It's the Remarkables in Otago. The mountains were named the Remarkables by Alexander Garvey in 1857, allegedly because they are one of the only two mountain ranges in the world which run directly north to south. An alternate explanation for the name given by locals is that early Queenstown settlers, right near the Remarkables, upon seeing the mountain range during sunset one evening, named them the Remarkables to describe the site. And I think looking at them, you can see exactly why they were called the Remarkables Mountains. One thing I did when I was in New Zealand that I would never do again is I went skydiving over the Remarkables Mountains. It was amazing and the scariest thing I've ever done in my entire life. I am so glad I did it. It was wonderful. I will never do it again. And the story my mother always tells me is that I called her after I did it. I didn't tell her beforehand, and she thanks me so much for not worrying her about jumping out of a plane. So look at those gorgeous, gorgeous mountains. And our last slide for today is of the Hobbiton movie set in Rotorua. So another thing you might know about New Zealand is that it's famously, a lot of fantasy movies are set there. And the Lord of the Rings movies and all the Hobbit movies were set there. And they kept some of the Hobbiton movie sets in Rotorua. So if you ever travel there, if you ever want to look up, you can still see the sets they used for the Shire in the Lord of the Rings and see these little hobbit holes. Or do a tour of many different Lord of the Rings filming sites. So I hope that this has been a really exciting journey through New Zealand for all of us. I know I certainly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Have you ever been to New Zealand? I know I've met a few people here who have. Brian, if you're watching, I know you've been to New Zealand. We've talked about it before. Do you have any special trips that you've taken in the past that really have stayed with you? This is one of the things I say about this time I spent in New Zealand, is that, no exaggeration, it was life-changing. I felt different after I had spent 5 months there, and I feel so thankful that I was able to have the opportunity to do that. So please, if you see me in the halls, please talk to me in general, but especially about New Zealand or traveling. And if you see anyone you want to share, maybe give in some viewer mail, please let us know. So that's it for today's episode. Tune in later today for Wellness with Deborah at 1:30 and On a Musical Note with Peter at 2:30. If you missed any portion of today's show, it will be replayed on Channel 88 at 6:30, and you can find all of our episodes on YouTube. See you tomorrow, same time, same place, same channel.